As we talked about a little bit last week, think about walking. We also need to think about the position of the head. And so starting with the chin just a little bit back and feeling perhaps that leans us backwards slightly. Feel it maybe a little bit in the feet, weight from the heels. And to counterbalance that heel weighting, finding the hip crease and folding forward. So just a slight bend forward at the hips. Feeling how that counterbalances that backward movement of the head. Ultimately may lead to a feeling of the spine being a little longer or straighter, taller. My weight's even front to back on my feet. So this little adjustment happens not just at the hip, but we want to notice how there's a subtle movement at the ankles as well. And so as the hip is flexing a little bit here, the knees are slightly flexed, and the ankle as well. So all three joints are working together. What's happening at the ankles is perhaps the most subtle, but it's actually really important. And it should change the feeling of my whole foot. So this is actually a big part of the walking. And as I was saying last week, this is not just about Tai Chi walking. This is good posture for just normal walking as well. The big difference is that with normal walking, if anything, that's going to be slightly exaggerated, that hip flexion, so as to put my center of gravity a little forward and start me moving. So it automatically, without any effort, the Tai Chi walking, the line of my weight is much more vertical, from the crown right down through the center of the head, through the center of the chest, right through the center of the abdomen and pelvic region, right over the center between the feet. So in the Tai Chi position, there is no forward urge. So I'm not leaning backward, my weight's not falling backwards, nor is it falling forward. Though, because we're not used to this kind of hip flexion with the head back, it may feel as if I'm leaning forward. So what's the difference? The feeling of leaning forward is just like a sense that my back, right, or my torso is tilted in an unusual way. How do I know if I'm actually leaning forward? Well, if the weight's coming to the balls of my feet, right, then I am actually leaning forward a little bit. Right? It's just like if I'm leaning backward slightly, my weight's on my heels. So it's when my weight comes down to the center of my feet. And we can define that center sort of just inside the ball of the foot. In acupuncture, the point is between the second and third toe, back behind the pad. So geometrically, that's a little bit forward. But it should be close to sort of functional center of the foot, right? So within that arched shape. And it's fairly center between the inside and outside of the foot. But yes, it is a little bit forward. But when my weight is centered, I feel it equally on the ball of the feet and the heel. So my normal posture, which is typically actually leaning backward a little bit, but with the head forward, which seems balanced, I may have it, notice how my feet have a tendency to sort of splay out and sort of perhaps collapse a little under the weight of the body. When I make this change, not only do I feel a little flexion, a little fold at the ankle, bringing me forward, but I should feel like the whole foot wakes up, that the arches lift and activate, that the toes are all a little bit active, right, without clawing. And if I want to explore this quality a little bit, I can actually start to shift the weight forward and back like we did last week. Sort of relax that arch and spread out the feet and then gather it and feel like we are, in fact, grabbing the floor a little bit, but with the whole foot. So I'm shifting my weight here no more than 70%. So when I'm back on the heels, 30% of the weight's still in the balls of the feet, toes. I have that grabbing feeling. When I'm forward, about 70%, 30% still in the heels. They don't feel like they're too light or lifting up. The whole foot stays grounded. But I really want to feel a spontaneous shape change. I'm not splaying my feet out and grabbing, right, with conscious effort. The conscious effort is just in that light weight shift forward and back, and I feel that change or play in the foot automatically. I want that for free. And if I'm not getting it, actually coming back up and looking what's happening in my head is really useful. And also looking at what's happening in the tilt of my hips. So one of the things I want to feel happening in the basic posture is that the back of the hips, the base of the spine is sinking down towards the floor a little bit, making the lower back feel very lightly stretched out or relaxed or released. So instead of a strong curve back here, hangs a little straighter. And that feeling goes along with that fold at the hips. They should work together. They're different ranges of motion. They're different actions, but we want them to work together. If I overdo it, it'll feel like tucking my tailbone under flattens out that fold or crease of the hips. So that's much too much because I want them both. I want the hips sinking down and back, the tailbone maybe feeling like it's dropping under the body. But I also want to feel like I'm slightly forward at the hips. And again, all of this should contribute to that activity of the feet, right? Just in the rest position. And then if I shift, I get that natural kind of pulse or pumping. The idea of it being like a pump is really useful. And the pumping is, as we said, part of what gets the blood and fluids back up into the torso from the feet. Things aren't pooling or stagnating, getting stuck down in the lower extremity. And if I can feel that here in this walking, or in this weight shift, when I start to walk, I may notice how it happens automatically. So for the moment, I can think of just natural walking, but rethinking it a little bit as basically the same posture, but a little forward feeling, the center being just a little bit forward so that it carries me along. We're very subtly falling forward and the feet are catching me. But as this happens, I can feel my feet kind of kneading the floor. Now that it's warmed up outside a little bit, it's easy enough to do this barefoot. So as my foot comes forward, it spreads out and then it grabs the floor. I'm talking about the front foot here. So I can feel that action as the weight comes onto it. Foot's nice and spread out when the heel comes down. Grabs the floor. And then if I stay focused on this foot, as the heel lifts, that foot starts to spread out again. Stays spread. And then grabs the floor. The front foot is grabbing the floor as the back foot, the heel is lifting, and the toes are spreading a little bit. And this is not something I'm consciously and separately doing. This is something I'm just trying to notice And as the weight comes forward into the foot, it's very evenly weighted as the weight arrives. So there's a moment where the whole foot is evenly weighted, and the whole foot is part of that activity of grabbing the floor. The back foot is not obviously evenly weighted. The heel is up, the ball of the foot, the toes are spreading out. So whenever we talk about the toes, it's not just where you see the toes end, but the deeper toe bones reaching up into the foot, the metatarsals, right? The bones we don't necessarily see there, but still function essentially as toe bones, just embedded in the foot. So if I notice, for instance, that my weight is slipping out to the side a little bit, there's some problem there. So the first way I want to adjust that difficulty is to A, think, is my head back? Can I relax my hips, especially down through the back? And do I have that slight hip crease? So if I'm in a position where I'm leaning backward, I may not feel the foot grabbing the floor at all. I may feel like the weight's rolling to the inside or the outside. If my head's a little forward, also, so head back, tilting forward a little bit, line it up. The real difference here between the natural walk and the Tai Chi walk, you can try it both ways, is that at this point, if I'm doing the Tai Chi walking, I'm just a little bit more vertical. And the weight's dropping through the center of that foot in such a way that I just pick that foot up and the body's not going to wobble or move. Right. When I do pick that foot up, I can bring it through the center, still nice and stable. I can put it down on the heel, and there's no weight that goes into it right away. So this is one of the key differences. Right? If I'm just a little more forward when I'm walking, as soon as that heel comes down, there's some weight in it right away, because it's catching me as I'm falling. But a more Tai Chi style walking, that foot comes down, there's no weight on it at all, I can just bring it right back. That cat stepping, or that feeling of like walking on thin ice. I put the foot down, I test it, I start to put weight on it very, very gradually. Even as the weight starts to come into it, if for instance I was, on the wet ice and it started to crack, I could pick it up, right, without having to lean backward. That's the Tai Chi quality. So again, in the middle. Another thing I might notice is that my knee is straightening out. I want to keep that knee soft. So when I'm in the middle position, I don't want to stand all the way up. If I'm flexing at the hip a little bit, it's the knee, it's the ankle, they're all working together. Which makes it easy to move very slowly. Natural walking has a certain sort of minimum pace. Again, gravity is sort of deciding for me. The Tai Chi walking, where I'm really vertically aligned with gravity, I can walk quite slowly. It's all the same to me, really. I can control that step, right, with a lot of precision. Now, what's another postural element that might be throwing off my balance here? And the relationship between the upper and lower body, my relationship with gravity, it's where my shoulders are hanging. So I may notice already when I bring the head back, my shoulders may come back with it a little bit. That's ideal. So head back, bending forward a little from the hips. But if the shoulders are still hanging forward in this position, it is not going to feel very comfortable. And it's not going to feel very stable. And again, just like having the head a little forward, it's very common to have the shoulders both forward and rolled in a little bit. Right? So if you notice that, right, you can sort of in your peripheral vision see the front of your shoulder, they're probably a little forward. And if you notice your hands at rest tend to roll back, right, then they're right forward and rotating probably. So I want the hands in a more neutral position. I'm going to start this by just opening up my hand, but also thinking of it as slightly cupped around the center. So just like the center of the foot was between the second and third toe, center of the hand is going to be between the second and third fingers, if we count the thumb. So between the index and middle finger, down around where those creases are running through the center of the hand, little soft spot there. So think of that as the center of another arch. I'm not doing this with a lot of effort, but I am making sure that there's a little spread between the fingers, and then almost like I'm palming a basketball. So if I'm in the basic position, I'd like to build that into the basic posture a little bit. And ultimately, it's going to feel like that happens automatically when I make the other adjustments. Right? It won't at first, but I'd like to look forward to getting to that place where when I start to bend forward from the hips a little bit, when I start to sink into the hips, knees, and ankles all together, finding that fold, as I start to drop the back of the hips, drop the sacrum, the base of the spine, and the head starts to come back, and maybe the shoulder opens up a little bit in the front and comes back as well, and the hand just starts to spread out and achieve a little tonus, right? A little quality of aliveness. So the hand's not stiff. That's not usually the problem when we're just standing around. It's not limp either. Right? That's the one we usually have to worry about. If my hand is limp, something's wrong. So it should be lively and awake. And eventually, I just want to feel that happening for free. So when we think about the shoulder position, it actually is more helpful to think about the shoulder blade position. So just like we were rocking our weight forward and backward before, I can bring my shoulders forward and backward consciously. One thing I want to notice about the shoulder blade is it's not moving straight forward and back. It's sort of sliding around my rib cage. Right? When it's coming to the front, it's separating, moving away from the spine and sliding around my ribs this way. When it comes back, it's moving toward the spine, not just towards the rear, but in towards the spine a little bit. And I'd like to add a little something to that, which is as the shoulder blades are moving back towards the spine, I also want to draw them down. Because I don't want the shoulder blades to wing or sort of pinch straight in towards the spine like this. By thinking of them moving down into my mid-back, it gives them the feeling of sort of being buried deep in the muscles of my back. Right? Sort of sinking in to the shape of my back. It's very much the feeling I want. Even when I come forward, if I think of drawing them slightly down into the ribs, it's helpful. And this is very gentle. It's not a big effort. So moving forward and backward here is actually kind of a complex geometry. It's front to back. It's in towards the spine and separating from the spine as it wraps around the body. And the whole time it's sort of gently drawn down towards the middle of the torso, especially in the most forward and most rear position. In the middle, right, you don't necessarily have to exert that effort to pull them down. And even when we are, the effort is almost more of an idea, right, than a big muscular force. So what we're looking for eventually is a position for those shoulder blades that's somewhere in the middle here. It's not the fully back position. But because there's a tendency to be forward, it's a little back and down, but not the extreme position. But here, if I do a bigger range of motion, it's going to be easier to find that middle position without any special effort. And then again, if I move my head, let's move the head forward and back a little bit. And then connect them, chin back, shoulders back and down, and then let everything sort of fall forward. You probably notice that after pulling everything back, everything tends to fall forward very quickly, sort of automatically. You don't really have to do any work to pull stuff forward. That's already our tendency. All right, we can blame our computers and cell phones and such for that. The foundation position is that little bit back. Chin, and when the chin comes back, it might be very slightly down so that the crown of the head, which is not at the tip top, but a little bit to the rear, feels like it's lifting up. So even here, the movement is not necessarily straightforward and back, but there's a little tilt to it. The chin's coming back and maybe slightly down. But I don't want to be looking at the floor. I want to imagine I can see out to the horizon. This is all going to be a little bit awkward if I don't remember to keep a little bit of crease or fold at the hips. Let's walk with that posture. Just a little more awareness of the arms. Try not to hold any stiff tension in that area. Be aware to make a little bit of corrective effort, almost just an idea. If it gets too much, just forget about it. Just let your arms go. And also noticing when we find the right place for the shoulders, perhaps the hands just start to wake up a little bit automatically. So the upper body posture here is very constant, right? There are no big changes. The feet, though, of course, I'm going to feel these alternations. And that subtle difference between being just a little more forward and feeling like the legs are just catching up. It's a much lighter feeling. Again, if I'm walking distance, this is the way I want to walk. Right? So I don't want to get tired out. I want to walk as efficiently as possible. But if I'm not walking very far, if I have a limited amount of time to exercise, right, or a limited amount of space, then changing the angle of the body just slightly, right, loads the legs, right, activates those muscles considerably more so that each step is requiring more effort, not conscious effort to tense the legs or anything, but there's automatically a new relationship with gravity and more work is happening. And ideally, that pumping action in the feet, ankles, up into the deep calf, right, gets a little stronger. That's the Tai Chi quality. When I'm walking naturally, I want to walk relatively quickly. This new change allows something to happen when I'm going relatively slowly. Not that I couldn't walk quickly in this position, right? But walking slowly is going to still do a lot, right? And do it differently. And so we would never want to give up natural walking. We want to improve it. Right? We want to notice how the things are similar and different. Now, since we've talked about the arms a little bit already, the last thing I wanted to talk about this morning is, right, how the arms naturally swing. So in a normal walk, what happens, right? The right hand goes out with the left hand goes out with the right foot. And people don't really have to think about this. There are various health problems where that stops happening naturally. And so it's not a bad idea to make sure that it's really happening as freely as possible and spontaneous. This is going to be more automatic than the natural walking position, right? That little forward tilt, right, is going to be conducive to that swinging. And the rhythm, the pace of it. Now, even in the natural walking, like I said, my head's not forward, the shoulders aren't forward. So that part of the posture is still the same. The head may not be back quite as clearly as it is in the Tai Chi posture, but the tendency is the same. You can still use part of it. Right? So, for instance, the chin may not be dropped in quite the same way lifting the crown. I may feel like the top of the head is the highest point. That's perfectly normal for everyday posture. The Tai Chi posture is when the chin comes back and also drops slightly in that area, just a little bit to the rear, right? Where the whirl of hair is or would be. Got any? Right? That becomes the high point. And that also comes from being a little bit more clear about that forward crease from the hip. But everyday posture, still quite similar. It's just a little bit less so. Even with the very first step, this may be a good exercise to end with. The very first step, I feel that change, right? That exchange, right? The opposite arm and leg forward. That tells me something's happening right from the very beginning. If I start walking and it takes a while for the arms to catch up, there's a disconnect. Automatically. And right, and the timing is perfect. The foot and the hand are in their most forward position at the same moment. And I don't have to do that. I don't have to think about it or try to make it happen. I just have to notice whether it's happening. If it's not, I have to look back at the posture and say, why? Not think, oh, I need to rush my hand to catch up or something. It has nothing to do with intentionally moving your arm. If my hands are dead, that may impede something, right? Shoulder position is out, that may impede something. Head carriage, any of these things. So again, finding, right? Not thinking opening my hands, doing anything special. Making a change up here in the head, neck, the shoulder, and feeling it happen automatically. Now, if I change For one last run to the Tai Chi posture, a little more vertical, something similar still happens. But it's not the big loping stride. It's not quite as big and free a swing. Something's a little more consolidated. Something's a little more stable, more concentrated. If there's a pump down there in the feet, I might start to feel something similar happening, maybe up under the arms. So the shoulder area should be compared to the hip, but we'll talk about that another time. But when I'm looking for a feeling that's, again, a little more consolidated, it's that pumping action, right? Various places in the body I might feel. It's a little stronger than the Tai Chi walk. Right? So the outward movement has actually shrunk a little bit. It's not that, like I said, big loping stride, the big free swings. Something outwardly is right, come in a little bit. Something inwardly becomes more concentrated and a stronger feeling, right? Deeper and stronger. Let's just shake out the arms and legs. Sink into one leg and let the other rise. We're just going to finish with a little walking in place. As similar as possible to that Tai Chi walking when we were stepping forward. Maybe just with a little emphasis of really releasing the weight down, feeling that foot very stable, even heavy, the weight passing right through it, right down into the ground in such a way that it makes the other leg just pop up off the floor. We'll talk about that more next time. But rather than thinking, lifting this leg, again, looking for the quality of something spontaneous happen. It's the way I drop my weight down and align the body that just makes that leg pop up very automatically. So why is this more like the Tai Chi walking? Because if it was like the regular walking, I'd have this big urge to go forward. So it must have to do with keeping the body aligned perfectly vertically with gravity. A couple minutes over, but not too bad. Shake out. Thank you.